Good day, good people of the interwebs. Well, I don't know how many people are with me now, but thank you for joining me if you did. Today, and I'm going to wait a little while, but today I'm going to also talk about the mess in Afghanistan and how no matter what the Western countries would have done, it would have been wrong. But hey, let's wait a second, let's see who joins us before I start talking my head off. And for those of you who are already checking the Discord server out, yes, I am no Guinea mod. So yeah. Anywho, hi there Dimitri, you're early today. That's a nice change. Hi there Michael, by the way, I assume you're still in the chat. I don't know who else is in the chat. According to YouTube, no one is in the chat, so that's not a lot of people. YouTube is so silly. How are you doing, by the way, Dimitri? And how are you doing, Michael, by the way? That's so unfair. I'm so used to Michael being here that I totally forget to say hi, Michael, and how are you doing, Michael? Test 2002. Okay. I said test 2002 at 2002, but I'll wait till it goes to 2003 because that's interesting too, I guess. And I'm looking at the numbers, which is stupid. It's still 2020, 22. It's still 2202. Oh man, I really hate those first minutes. You know, I'm really no good at them. But yeah, there you have it. Oh, by the way, I don't have to say anything because you can see when you post your chat, you can see it in the stream. Silly me. Stupid me, really. But it's 2003 now. 2203, I'm sorry. And apparently I have two people here. And I'm not sure, but maybe I should start. I think Afghanistan is changing from poppy monopoly to minerals. I think you'd be right, Dimitri. Though, let's see how it goes. Almost a minute delay on the stream. Bloody hell. Well, I don't care. It's nice to know that this is how it is. Oh. And I notice now that I have a terrible typo in the title. So that's pretty stupid too. Hoppa. Hoppa. That should have fixed it. And I have a message of someone who is already... Oh, YouTube. Someone was faster than I am. Hi there, Mycroft. I did say there was a typo in my title. Maybe I was a little bit later than the stream reached you. But I've already fixed it. Look, I'm good. But hi there, Mycroft. Long time no see, mate. Hope you're not too drunk today. Then again, being drunk talking about Afghanistan might be a good idea. I mean... See, here's the thing. We are now being told how terrible Biden was in the way he left Afghanistan. And in a way, I agree with people complaining on how Biden fucked it up. Because, yeah, sure, he did. But the funny thing is, now people are complaining that because we left the way we did, and with we, I mean every country in the Western world except for France, because France was already pulling its people out, so France actually did it smart. But yeah, we left Afghanistan, and now people are complaining how this is terrible for the women in Afghanistan, because, well, we let them hang out to dry. I mean, poor women are now being, you know, married out, and they have to wear the burqa again. And you know what? That indeed is somewhat bad. I mean, I don't like it when people get subjugated like that. So I agree with everyone who says this is a bad thing. What I don't understand, though, is the same people that are talking about how terrible it is for the women of Afghanistan now never talked how bad the previous regime, or the Taliban regime, was for the boys of Afghanistan. The term bazi, and I probably butchered the pronunciation, dancing boys, and in the background I've used an image of a boy dancing. That's not all they do. They also get raped. I know it's a dirty word, shouldn't use it. Fuck YouTube, going to use it anyway. Because this is what happened. Nobody cared when it was happening to boys in Afghanistan. And let's be honest, it still happens in Pakistan too. There were American soldiers up to the highest level of the American chain of command who knew this was happening. And well, they were told not to interfere because it's local customs. But if that's true for the rape of boys, why isn't it true for the mistreatment of women or girls? Don't get me wrong, I'm not in favor of it happening, but shouldn't the same argument apply? Well, Trump had a plan handling over the power and police also. That's true, and maybe if it would have done according to the plans of Trump, it would have gone better, but we don't know that. Renovatio, in fairness, the French are pretty experienced in retreating. Maybe, but never forget that the original plan indeed was to leave in May. Biden changed that, which is probably also why Taliban is now saying, well, fuck America, we're going to do whatever we want. Because America didn't keep their word, so why should we? I could be wrong in that, I don't know. But the thing is, we didn't care about when the boys were a victim, and now we're talking about how terrible it is for the girls being a victim. But if the argument was, well, it's the local culture, then whether it's the boys or the girls that are the victim, isn't it still just the local culture? I like the fact how people now pissing and moaning about the Taliban are basically being blamed for pissing and moaning on brown people, even though that they're, on average, not that brown. They're quite a bit like Europeans. Not a lot, not 100%, but pretty much. Their culture, however, is vastly different. The problem with culture is that it drives how a society goes. And in Afghanistan, we didn't change the culture. Mind you, this was one of the main arguments for staying in Afghanistan that long. We stayed there for 20 years and we didn't do much at all. Now, the reason why we didn't do much at all is because in the Western world, the woke lefts were complaining about how we shouldn't colonize Afghanistan. And it was seen as an occupation and we're only there for the oil or the heavy minerals or yada 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 blah 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 blah. It's not supposed to be neo-colonialism. It's not to be state building. So what the hell were we doing there? So for a long time, there have been people calling out for the West to leave Afghanistan. Why the hell are you in Afghanistan if you don't really want to change anything? And in this, I agree. Personally, I wasn't in favor of the occupation of Afghanistan either, even though I totally agree that it's a hellhole and it's terrible for boys and girls there. But it's their culture. So, and I'm not sure with you on that one, Dimitri. Their culture didn't become war since the Soviets. It was war before that too. Don't forget, Afghanistan used to be one of the cultural strongholds of Buddhism. And that's been completely destroyed. And when the English came to India, I think it was the Pashtun that started Deobandi Islam, which is pretty much anti-European or anti-Great Britain. And this is the same sort of Islam that the Taliban are adhering to, which is pretty much anti-Western world. And yeah, everything that we think is good, they think is terrible. So they will fight tooth and nail against what we think is a good culture. And we're not going to change their culture by only staying for 20 years. If we really want to change them, we should use a lot of time to try to make changes. But we didn't, because especially people who were against the war, and yes, sure, I was one of them, pointed out that it's their own culture. If they want to live like that, as terrible as it is, people need to change their culture from within. If they don't, it's not going to be changed. That's not completely true. It is completely possible to colonize a country and then change the culture, but that's going to take at least 10 to 15 generations. And we only had 20 years, so at most 2 generations. So we didn't change anything at all. Now, we did show the people in Afghanistan how life could be better. And a lot of people in Afghanistan enjoyed this. One of the first images we could see when we heard about the Taliban taking over Afghanistan again was people changing the images in front of their shops. Because there were images of women dressed nicely, stuff like that. It had to be destroyed, because once the Taliban would come in, that would be an offense. And the Taliban might say that they will become more progressive, but they won't. And they will tell you that the women will have all the rights the Quran bestowed upon them, which isn't much. Especially if you look at it from a Deobandi point of view. Women don't have any rights. I mean, if one woman gets raped, she needs to have 4 female witnesses to prove that she's a victim. And if the perpetrator has 1 male victim, the woman is going to need at least 1 male witness or 2 female extra witnesses to break even the imbalance. The role of women in Deobandi isn't very progressive. And we know that. We've seen that. 20 years ago, it was used as an excuse, together with the Twin Tower attack, to attack Afghanistan. We knew back then that Osama bin Laden wasn't in Afghanistan. Funny enough, he was in Pakistan, which is an ally of America. Yeah, sorry, I can't make sense of it either, but yeah. But we went into Afghanistan trying to change the world, their world. But we didn't, because we didn't invest in changing things. Now, that's not completely true, because certain countries that were there did invest in changing things, and small changes were made, but we never changed the culture. This is why the Taliban is still so strong. And the day America closed the airport and left is the very day that the Taliban rushed Afghanistan and took it back. Because most of the Afghani soldiers, well, they only had a job. That's the reason why they became soldiers, not because they wanted to defend the country. Fuck that, that's what America was there to do. That's why the Dutch were there, the French. So yeah. Okay, back to the chat. Let me see. The Russians never invaded anyone or ever caused anything bad to happen. The Russians told me so. Well, that's partly true, because it weren't the Russians, it were the Soviets. So there is that. The Russians never did anything, it were the Soviets. What else? Also, never forget, when the Taliban took over, they destroyed very important cultural places of Buddhists, which is also true. And, oh, okay. Dimitri, about Buddhism. Islam completely changed the religion, but not the culture. Buddhism in Afghanistan is my favorite subject, so appreciative you mention it. Thank you very much. Well, when Afghanistan was truly a Buddhist country, it never was a big Buddhist country, but it was one of the main sources of Buddhism. We don't know how the people lived back then. I mean, we believe it was still a tribal land. But yeah, Buddhism and tribalism don't really go hand in hand. So I'm not quite sure how it went back then. Tribalism and Islam go hand in hand, though. Considering the left can no longer define what a woman is, anyone, they will have a difficult time understanding Islamic laws. Witness demands in a courtroom as bad as each other. Well, the woke left can't even understand what the difference between real and fantasy is. So there is that. And how about war for money? Well, I do believe that what we saw in Afghanistan indeed was a war for money, because they didn't really want to change anything. Hell, they knew about the abuse of boys, but did they do anything? No, because it's part of the culture. They knew that all of a sudden the opium production in that country skyrocketed. Heroin, I mean, 80% of the world's heroin comes from Afghanistan, which is a problem, I would say. Well, yeah. Did we do anything about it? No, because if we would destroy it, the poor Afghan soldiers would have had nothing. You know, couldn't they grow food? Ah, don't be such a bigot, you bastard. This is the thing. Afghanistan is not even a failed experiment, because the experiment bloody well did what they wanted it to do. But they destroyed a country. Now the Taliban isn't much better, don't get me wrong, but there's not much we can do from the outside. Either we're going to have to take over and really change the country, which is going to take at least 150 years, or we're going to let them do themselves what they want to do. But we have to defend the borders, which is always a good idea anyway. I mean, a country should defend its borders. I know the woke left disagree, but if a country doesn't have borders, it doesn't have anything. Didn't the Taliban just destroy a huge Buddhist statue of one of their heroes in the last week? I'm not sure if they did it in the last week, but I have seen several images in the last 40 years of the Taliban destroying Buddhist paraphernalia. Good morning, ludicrous, though I'm not quite sure why you call it morning. It's 10 o'clock in the evening here. Then when George W. Bush invaded, he didn't had a plan. It was a reactionism to 9/11. He needed to do something, otherwise the USA would have boiled over and the pressure exploded in all directions. I understand what you're saying, Michael, but I'm not so sure if George Bush should have gone after Afghanistan, because the Taliban and Osama bin Laden's organization, which I can't remember the name of at the moment, they weren't friends. Again, the Taliban is Deobandi, and Deobandi is also a fringe group within Islam. So there are Islamic groups that pretty much don't like the Deobandi, and therefore they don't like the Taliban. Osama bin Laden has a very different point of view on what Islam is, so they aren't friends. Morning all is his line, and good evening sounds so depressive. Really, Michael? All right. Afghanistan was the Buddhist center of the world. Yes, I know you're correct, Dimitri. But I don't understand how with Buddhism, Afghanistan was still that tribal, because Buddhism doesn't lend itself for tribalism very much. So, Al-Qaeda, thank you, Michael. I have the feeling that maybe the tribalism came with Islam, but I'm not sure about that. Maybe it was there with Buddhism, I don't know. But yeah, Buddhism, Afghanistan was one of the biggest Buddhist countries in the world back in the times. Don't get me wrong though, there are plenty of things horribly wrong with the world. And somehow I don't understand it. Either we're bad for invading Afghanistan and trying to bring peace to the region, which we somewhat did, though only somewhat, and now we're terrible for leaving the region. there is no winning situation when it comes to Afghanistan. Hi there, Toxic. Long time no see. I am glad to welcome you on my channel once again. The problem is that people now blame Biden. And I think Biden did a terrible job. But at the same time, what would have been a good job when it comes to Afghanistan? What would have been a good way to deal with the situation? The woke left told us for years we shouldn't stay in Afghanistan. It's a bad thing we stay in Afghanistan. I somewhat agree with that. I don't believe in nation building. But if we can't stay there, the only other option is to leave. But now we're being blamed for leaving. And yes, I agree, Biden made a pig's ear of it. But at the same time, leaving is leaving. Personally, there are a lot of people that says we should have done it differently. But in the end, we still would have left. The only difference is that the Taliban then would have picked up the country maybe a week or two later. But the end result would still be the same. We all know the end result would be the same. Hell, the Taliban says, okay, this province is mine. And the Afghani forces, which have been trained by the American military, drops his rifles and runs. We all knew this would happen. Or rather, I assume we all knew this would happen because the signs were there already. But somehow, we are surprised. Well, I guess we're surprised about the way America left because that was a mess. But at the same time, are we really surprised? Shouldn't we be more surprised how come we accepted the abuse of boys, the pedophilic abuse on boys? But now we complain about how women are going to be victims of pedophilic abuse? And don't get me wrong, I agree with you that women or boys shouldn't be victims of pedophilia. But can we force our norms on a different country? Well, at one point I would say, yeah, sure we can. But that's neocolonialism. So then we can't. But if we can't, we should also not complain because, hey, you know what? It's not our fault that this happens. But it is our fault because we should do better. It can't be both ways. We can't do better and leave. Biden didn't accelerate the retreat from Afghanistan though, Nick. The plan for America to leave Afghanistan was supposed to be in May. Biden extended the stay and I guess this upset the Taliban, so... But yeah, I agree with you. You should evacuate your people first and you should evacuate your materials and at the very last you evacuate your soldiers from the best defensible airport there was. But the best defendable airport they basically gave up right at the start, and now all they have is Kabul airport, which is a pretty crap place to defend. If he had stuck to Trump's plan for May and kept air support and the peace treaties Trump had arranged in the area, that might have made the transition a lot easier. Indeed, ludicrous. It seems that that is the case. It seems that Biden only did this to gain some... sorry, I need to blow my nose. It seemed that Biden only did this to create some political clout. Look, I did this. But then it fucked up. It blew up in his face. And all of a sudden is, yeah, but I didn't do this. This is because of Trump. Yeah, but Trump had arranged a vastly different situation. They just needed more female, 10% wasn't enough, and LGBT troops, and the victory would have been certain. I blame the lack of inclusion. I think the Taliban agrees with you. We should have sent in the feminists to take care of the Taliban threat. Yeah, well, only true feminists then. Sure, send them all in. By accelerate, I mean that he did it suddenly. Yeah, that's true. He postponed it till September, and then all of a sudden he started saying, okay, now we go do it. Trump had set up a specific group of people in the military with the task of making sure that this would go in a good way. But Biden, in all his wisdom, decided to disband that group, I should have said, after he won the election. So yeah, that's one of the issues that Afghanistan is now having. But somehow, even if Biden fucked up bad, and believe me, I'd agree with everyone who said Biden fucked up. I think that there wouldn't have been a good way of doing it, because even if we would have done it in Trump's way, we would still see Taliban take over in a few weeks after the Americans had all gone out. The difference obviously being that all of the Americans and all of the foreigners would have been safe by then, so that's a good thing. But yeah, in the end, Afghanistan is a hellhole, and that's not going to change because we want it to. They could have been better organized, but organizing all these is not easy. Well, actually, it was better organized, but then Biden decided that it wasn't good enough, so he wanted to do it his way, which kind of created the mess that Afghanistan is in. And the thing is, we're talking about how this is terrible for Europeans and Africans and Americans who are caught in Afghanistan. And yeah, that's true. It's bad for everyone who's caught in Afghanistan, including the many men. And the funny thing is, if we now, and I'm not going to show any videos of what's going on in Afghanistan. I mean, a lot of videos everyone has seen about the failed training of the Afghan army, or the huge amount of people running around the airport trying to get on board of the planes. If only half of the men would actually pick up a gun to try and defend their country. I wonder why both Trump and Biden didn't seek to leave in the autumn or winter. The warmer seasons favor the Taliban. This is true. Trump decided to go in May. May is kind of the beginning of the warmer season, but he hadn't agreed with the Taliban, and he had a plan to leave everything behind, take his soldiers out last. So if he would have left fighting if the Taliban didn't stop attacking. The Taliban didn't start attacking, by the way, because the Taliban agreed with Trump. When Biden said we're going to leave, they left like a thief in the night. One day the Americans are there, the second day a lot of the Americans are gone. This surprised everyone in Afghanistan, including the allies. So yeah, there is that. I think if Trump had not been booted out, he would have upped the ante and not had a problem bombing. And that's what would have kept the Taliban in check, because they knew Trump wouldn't have had a problem bombing them. That's why the Taliban would have waited till America and all the Americans were safely out of the country, because they feared Trump. Kind of makes it clear that they don't fear Biden, which is completely understandable, because the American army, even though they are well equipped and well trained, has become a laughingstock. Which is a bad thing, in my humble opinion. The thing that concerns me is that if you don't take care of your assets, nobody will want to work with you anymore. And that's the problem America is going to have to face in the coming few years. Personally, I think we should have wiped the Taliban off the face of the planet, and that's before Trump even got in office. This would have been true at the start of the Afghani war, but after a few years that no longer became a viable option, because the Taliban, especially the last few years, have been relatively quiet. But yeah, that's the problem. We went into Afghanistan, but we never really knew what we were going to do there. I mean, the Dutch in Oeruzgan tried a lot in building up the country. They built schools, they built hospitals, etc., etc. But yeah, they couldn't defend them against the Taliban. So when the Taliban took it down, they had to rebuild it. But they didn't fight back. None of the forces that took over Afghanistan fought back. And then we trained an Afghani army that still didn't fall back against the Taliban insurgents. So we know that this was a failed project. And yes, the Taliban is backed by China now. Russia seems to be in the same side as the Taliban as well. Then again, Afghanistan does have some minerals, so it's very possible that both Afghanistan, Russia and China will have interesting trade agreements coming soon. And yes, Trump did try to get them out earlier, but was blocked by the military. This was a big deal in the last year of Trump's, how do you call it, presidency, because he had already promised to take out the troops, and he had already made a plan, but in the end the troops weren't really taken out. This was true for Syria as well. So yeah, the problem was that Trump was not so much a failed president because he did a lot of things good, but the second layer around him, so the administrative people, the military people, they didn't really listen to what Trump said. They basically did whatever they wanted, and Trump wasn't made aware. So yeah, there is that, which to me is the ultimate form of corruption to begin with. But yeah, sure, why not? I'm not sure, Michael Keller, if the Taliban was the freedom fighter, because I think a lot of Afghani people wanted to get rid of the Taliban. I think this is also why we see so many people wanting to flee the country now, because they really didn't want to go back to the Taliban. The problem is, this is what's going on in the big cities. And people didn't seem to care about what was going on in the small villages and in the rural areas. The basic flyover country we're talking about. And there is a huge problem with that, but once again America will find out what that problem is. The Western world will find out what the problem is, because let's not pretend that Biden is the only one who failed in this, because let's be honest, America failed, but so did England and so did the Netherlands. France had a plan and they were already removing their civilians from Afghanistan, so France didn't fail as badly. But yeah, the European countries should have come together and said, you know what, America is leaving, but we still need to do something. And Dimitri is right. China is going to have a lithium monopoly, most likely, if they can get the lithium from Afghan. It's true that the Russians are in it too, so who knows, it might be one of those two. But Europe and America, yeah, they're fucked. So we're going to be dependent on China for a lot of our electronics, which is interesting. Only parts of Afghan supported the Taliban, yes. Like Jesse James in the Wild West, he was an outlaw in the eyes of most of the nation, but not in his own state. This is true for the Taliban too. The Taliban was supported in rural areas, but the cities, they didn't care much for him. Oh man, yeah. Ow, 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 ow. Now the problem is, we could have gotten rid of Taliban. I'm repeating myself. We could have gotten rid of Taliban, but we lacked the political will to do so. And I think that is the problem. The problem is not that America fucked up. They did, but that's not the problem. The problem is not that Europe fucked up. They did. That's not the problem. The problem is that we are being told we did everything we could. And because we failed, we now need to take in the poor people of Afghanistan. So there's going to be a new rush of victims of the Afghani war, refugees that can't be picked up by Pakistan, who basically paid a lot of money to the Taliban to help them get up and fight back. No. And obviously, the people of Afghanistan won't be welcome anywhere. So they have to be welcomed in Europe and America. And I have no idea how that's possible. Because their culture is so inherent different than anything the West has. Importing these people will create the biggest problems in Europe and America. We're not to talk about that. And yes, the Taliban will become a theocratic dictatorship, not a military one, but a theocratic one. But there are people supporting the Taliban, I think. I think we are secretly supporting the extremists. Yes, on that you're correct. I'm not even sure we're doing it secretly. Anyway, I'm not sure if I missed anything. If anyone wants to say something, then please do. Otherwise, I'm going to call it quits because I think we've mentioned everything so far. I find it funny that we can see so many people talk about it so long. But basically, this is not a failure of the West. This is a failure of woke. The problem is that because of woke, the West failed. Had we not gone aboard with woke, we could have done differently. What about the trans in Afghanistan? Well, that's indeed no longer a problem. I mean, feminism in Afghanistan is pretty much done too. Though in the West we're now talking about the poor girls that are the victim of rape and abuse. The last 20 years, when the boys were victims of rape and abuse, we didn't talk about it because, well, it's just a culture, innit? And this is something we in the West need to understand. Either all cultures are equal, then we had no reason to be in Afghanistan. And we also have no reason to feel guilty about what's going on in Afghanistan now, or all cultures are not equal. And by recognizing that, we can then say, therefore we shouldn't allow them in. I don't feel happy about what's going on in Afghanistan, and I really feel sorry for the people that aided the Western world military. But I think at the other point we have to say, we tried, we failed, fuck them. Germany openly supporting the Taliban since they promised to have women within their government. Yeah, how stupid can you be? The Taliban promised to have women in their government. I'm like, yeah, sure. They'll probably be allowed to bring the coffee and whatnot. Feminism done. Germany transferred 200 million euro to Afghanistan so the Taliban keeps the gender studies. Oh, fucking hell. See, this is the problem. We are so woke that we don't care how stupid it sounds, how stupid it is. We're still dropping in money. So we want to know how the Taliban is going to survive. Well, they're going to get money for stupid stuff like gender studies. And then obviously not a lot of people will follow gender studies because the few that will are most likely either going to laugh in the class and say, ha, I have to be here because that's why I get money, or they're going to get killed. Yeah, that's indeed very frustrating. Don't worry, Angelina Jolie just joined Instagram to promote women and girls in Afghanistan. The boys? Who cares? But that's the news of feminism always. They don't care about the boys. But they don't really care about the women either. It's just virtue signaling because they're not going to do fuck all to help them. It's not a joke. I know it's not a joke. I mean, Germany is a joke. But I know they spend money, Michael. I know you were correct on that one. Don't you think it's infuriating though? We're talking about this as if it's some kind of trade-off game. People are actually dying. I mean, how terrified must you be to climb on the side of a plane going into the air, knowing full well that if that plane is in the air and you can't hang on, you'll fall to your death, which happened to several people. How terrified must you be? That's not a spur of the moment thing, or at least I don't think it is. But yeah, shit happens, doesn't it? Anywho, unless someone wants to join me in the Discord server to talk to you people, I'm going to call it quits now, because I noticed I wanted to talk about this topic, but at the same time I'm noticing it's really pissing me off. Personally, I think, you know what, build a wall around the country, and if they survive and they want to be real people and have a real society, then they're welcome to join us. And if not, then I'm sorry, we can't save everyone. My old teacher, as a long time ago, he basically had this idea for the whole of the Middle East. Just build a wall around it, and after 150 years, check how things are going. If everything is well and they want to join us, let them. If not, keep the wall there and keep them within their own little bubble, where they can fight each other at all heart's content, but stop bothering the rest of the world. Well, it's infuriating that they complain about Afghanistan people losing their freedom while they openly started discriminating non-vaxxed people here in Europe, making it worse than in Stun. I don't think it's worse, don't get me wrong. I do think that the anti-vax bullshit is pretty bad. I don't think it's as bad as what's going on in Afghanistan. Honest is honest. Biden sold it to China. No, Dimitri. Biden didn't sell it to China. He gave it